Let's continue with the recaps of Levy Rosman participating in the New York City Invitational round-robin tournament celebrating the Labor Day, which is upcoming on 2nd September. And this is his fourth tournament after the return to the competitive chess, attempting to get the Grand Slam title. I've been coaching him for the past couple of months, and yesterday he played round 5 game against Oliver Barbosa, a strong Philippine grandmaster who peaked almost at 2600 about 10 years ago. Now he's rated only 2439, but still a very strong opponent. So in this game, Levy opened with d4, the queen's pawn move, something we're definitely going to include in his repertoire a bit more. So we noticed in our pre-tournament prep that Barbosa stays true to his repertoire of playing the semi-Slav. We had a lot of ideas because not only Barbosa was playing the semi-Slav, also some other players were playing the same system. So it's actually, whenever we're doing a prep, we're not only thinking about this particular game or this particular tournament, we're thinking about a larger picture, how to make these lines work for the coming months and possibly even years. But there was one line that Levy always wanted to try. It's a c takes on d5, c takes on d5, and knight c3. Now, this gives some very interesting opportunities for white, and I felt that for this particular game, it's probably not a bad idea. So here, knight c6 was played by Oliver. Normally, black plays knight f6 here, but a knight c6 also seems to be a move. However, this is seemingly a small inaccuracy because Levy immediately played e4, attacking the center. Quite an unusual move, and Barbosa was immediately out of the prep. I mean, he simply did not expect that Levy's going to play the exchange Slav. This was the part of the prep to surprise him, go for a simpler position. And now the point is, if he takes on e4, now Levy can play d5. Knight b4 drops the knight with queen a4 check, as you can see. And knight e5 is simply queen a4 check here, queen e4, and knight g6. And now actually a very important move. Bishop c4, knight f6, queen e2, and white is simply dominating position. The pawn on d5 is clearly limiting whatever black can do because he has problems to develop the darks with bishop. So the other thing that Barbosa could have done here, he could have played e6, and now Levy could play e5, some sort of a French advanced position where white's plans are pretty easy, knight f3, bishop e2, maybe h4, h5. So it didn't happen because Barbosa played knight f6. Here, apparently, the best move is to play e5. And now after knight e4, white has this very strong move, bishop d3. The point is, if black decides to take on c3, this immediately gives white a commanding lead off the center and a good chance to start a kingside attack, h4, h5. So most likely, Barbosa would have to play after bishop d3 something like knight takes on d4. And now there's a check on a4. So this basically forces matters. Knight c6, knight e4, d takes bishop e4, and we reach some sort of a Sicilian Alapan position where white is tiny bit better, but probably black is pretty solid. So Levy here decided to play f3, which sort of feels similar to the fantasy variation of the Caro-Kann, and this was part of the prep for a particular one game. And the main line here was d takes on e4, which is the top choice of an engine, because here if you play d5, knight e5, I think the continuation was f takes on e4, e6, and knight f3. The position is more or less equal, but we felt that for this particular game, it's a good choice, right? Because, again, I mean, so far in the tournament, Levy has been struggling. He had only half points out of 4. He played only one decent game against James Chirilov in round 2. Every other game were clearly below how he normally plays, and I thought that we have to try to change something, right? So in the previous game, when he was playing against Mark Paragua, my suggestion was try to be solid. It just led to a terrible position. Levy was clearly not feeling whatever was happening over the board, so I thought, okay, fine, let's try to spicy up things. Let's play something more dynamic and see what happens. But what happened here is e5, and here this is something I have to take on myself because I should have checked a bit more closely before the game prep whatever was here in these files, because e5 is a very natural move. So black counter-strikes the center, and I think that Barbosa made a very smart psychological choice because he clearly can see like everybody else, can see that Levy is struggling in the tournament, and that's why you want to go for a sharper fight, because Levy is missing moves and he's not playing at his level at the moment. So e5 is something I should have predicted myself as a coach, and I should have reviewed these files before the start of the round. But unfortunately, we had double rounds every day, so there's almost no time to double check things. And again, it's very interesting how it works. Before the tournament, you see one idea is going to work nicely for one particular game, but when it happens, let's say there's a lot of background information like a bad start, maybe the initial planned idea is not really that great. Unfortunately, as they say, everybody after the war is very smart. All right, so what happened is that Levy decided to take on e5. Now the point is, after knight takes on e5, the pawn on d5 is under attack. So if Levy would try to play, for example, something like d takes on e5 here, bishop c5 is a typical gambit. This diagonal is quite weak. Black is going to play short castle, rook e8, and black has a massive compensation here. Also, knight e5 is quite similar here. Black can just open up the position and play for activity. Like, even this is okay. Takes, takes, queen d5 takes, and now play some sort of an active move like bishop f5 and bishop b4, long castle. So white is completely underdeveloped, and the pawn on d5 most likely will fall. So Levy played very quickly f4. Yeah, I think that f4 was already improvisation right here. Black cannot really play knight g4 because now the key idea is that white's going to play h3, and this is, by the way, very important motive here. So this diagonal is closed, and black cannot play queen h4, and after knight h6, now you play e5. Yeah, this is a very nice idea. So black will play knight e4, and you can even afford to take, and maybe trade the queens and play something like g4 to shut off the knight from the game. Play bishop e3, bishop g2, maybe long castle and have a good position. So what happened here is that Barbosa surprised him with knight c6, which makes perfect sense. And now Levy started to think. And when I was doing the coverage, I started to get really nervous for him right now, because basically the only continuation here is the sort of wrong-looking e takes on d5. And why I'm saying the wrong-looking e takes on d5 is because normally this is what black wants in those positions. I mean, black wants to sacrifice the pawn on d5 and get a lot of dynamics. However, one thing I think it's very important also for Levy, always remember about that chess is a very concrete game. I mean, somebody even said this very famous quote, "I don't care how weird it looks. If it works, it works." So in this position, e takes on d5 is already strictly the only move. And now the key idea here is that after knight b4, so black hits the pawn on d5, Levy has to play bishop b5. I mean, queen a4 check does no good, because you see the bishop in f8 now guards the knight on b4. So you have to give a check here, bishop d7, and again, almost the only move d6. Okay, maybe here Levy could have tried to bail out and play something like knight f3, allowing black to regain the pawn like takes, knight e5, and castle short, you know. By the way, this is something you can always do whenever you feel that your opening is not going your way. It's a good idea to remember about these things, that you can always bail out, right? You feel your opening experiment has not worked, and you just get out of there and try to normalize the situation. But again, I think it's quite important to understand the context. The context is that Levy has had a terrible start of the tournament so far. Psychologically, he's quite not there, and that's why at this very fragile state, it's incredibly difficult to be to make him the objective choices. So the correct move here was apparently d6, threatening with queen e2 check. As you can see, the king here is in trouble. So the problem for black is that indeed he has to make a lot of easy moves. So bishop b5, knight b5, this is a threat. Queen a5 is a very normal counter-attacking move, hitting the knight and threatening with the discovered check. So actually this move, knight c7, king d7, and knight a8 is incredibly risky. Black can just collect the rook on a1. There's also the simpler move, bishop d6, something I did not see during the coverage. So black is just taking the knight and going for an attack, and you just look at white's position, you're asking yourself, what on earth is white doing here, right? So it just makes no sense. And here after queen a5, Levy would have to pick up apparently the only line which is incredibly difficult if you are not feeling yourself. So, which is queen e2 check. Now the point is, after king d7, you would have to understand that knight f3 is good. So for example, there's a line like knight c2 check, king d1, knight takes on a1. Black wins the entire rook, but after knight e5 check, king e8, and for example, oh wait, it drops the queen, but king c8, let's say queen c4, king b8, somehow white just wins by playing bishop d2. Yeah, these are really computerish lines, so white is down the rook, and yet he wins because of domination, queen d8, knight f7, etc. So all of this maybe would have made more sense if Levy had a great start, or this would have been round one when he's feeling the game, but when you are in trouble, when you are mentally quite not there, and you are not playing your best chess, this is close to impossible line to pick up. Yeah, so the best line according to Engine is something like knight e3 check, attacking the knight, king f1, queen b5, knight e5 check, you can't take the knight, the queen's under attack, bishop e3, wonders continue, Engine gives here some ridiculous lines, and in the end white is pushing. So I was a bit worried when I saw all of this, and also the main problem is that there's another move, which feels like it's logical, because remember this line, when Levy was considering that his opponent is going to play knight g4. Now, h3 is a great idea. You play e5, you hit the knight, and now after knight e4, you play, once again, this line takes, straight queens, play g4, shut off the knight. So e5 feels like a generic good move. But again, this is something that Levy has to pick up, and we are going to talk about this in our training sessions, is that you can't always generalize in these positions where the situation requires specific contonations, right? So e5 is a generic move, but here, specifically here, it's a huge mistake. And after knight g4, suddenly, I think he was mainly expecting knight e4, more or less the same position, like with knight g4 and knight h6. He thought that, here even he can take it and play something like bishop e3, and he has a good position, right? There's nothing wrong with the position. So now, in his horror, he realized that black can just sacrifice the pawn on d5, which sometimes happens even to the very best. People just forget that your opponent can sacrifice material to get initiative. And now it's just suddenly very difficult, because if Levy plays queen takes on d5, of course Barbosa can just reject the queen trade, play queen b6, threaten all kinds of threats here, knight f2, queen f2, bishop e6. White's position is just horror, or having an extra pawn, but all the defenses are wide open. So Levy thought here for a long time. I could see that he was struggling to regain the confidence. He did back up the best move, bishop e2, and now the knight on g4 is under attack, and the logical move here would have been for Barbosa to play d4, knight e4, and bishop b4, and continue development, but this would allow Levy to get back in the game. Actually, Barbosa find the best move, bishop c5. Indeed, that's why he is a strong grandmaster. Again, the point is that the pawn on d5 doesn't matter. Black is playing incredibly aggressive, and after bishop g4, which just happened in the game, black just plays queen h4 and regains the sacrificed material. So g3, this happened, queens have to disappear from the board, and now this position already is simply depressing, because there's no good moves in a terrible position. Right after one blunder, Levy is facing just impossible position. So I was trying to understand, maybe h3, bishop f5, and something like knight f3 made a bit more sense. Try to salvage the position with d4, knight b5, but even I look at this position, knight b4, I just do not want to think about this position any further. It just looks so bad. That's why Levy's move, knight takes on d5, it is a mistake, but at least it makes sense. It's like, let's try to get over this, and if black is going to pick up one move, which is going to kill the game immediately, so be it. So what's the problem with this move? White is threatening to give a fork on c7, so the obvious move seems to be a long castle, right? Well, actually, if Barbosa had formulated that there are problems with this diagonal, he would have picked up bishop f5. This is immediately game over. Because knight c7, king d7, knight a8, black just plays bishop e4, collects the rook. For example, knight f3, rook f1, bishop g2. This rook is falling, and after that, the knight on a8. So you simply cannot do it. And that's it. So after this bishop f5, this threat is simply impossible. And if Levy plays knight c3, knight b4, simply seals the deal. This is a fork, this is a problem, so everything just starts to fall apart. Black is winning. So luckily for Levy, Barbosa missed this, and he played the long castle. And now after knight e3, bishop e6, Levy suddenly got back in the game. So again, what I slightly didn't like about Levy's approach in this game, and I didn't like a lot of things, but again, psychologically, Levy was just quite not there in this game. He played knight f3 after like 6 minutes think. I mean, this is strictly the only move. Why should be rushing the development very quickly and just immediately try to bring the pieces in the game? So 6 minutes on this position, he should have done this like in 1 minute even, or like 30 seconds. So here Black played f6. It makes sense because Black wants to open up the position and get to the white king, and that's why Levy should try to keep things closed. So Levy played bishop d2, again attempting to complete development, which was a nice idea, because after f takes on e5, I'm not sure what was Levy's plan, but I think he should have tried to play rook c1, pinning the knight, threatening to regain the pawn on e5, and here, for example, after bishop e3, e takes on e4, white can just take g takes on e4, bishop a2, bishop a7, rook e8 check, king f2, and even though white's position feels a bit shaky, actually white is equal here. So this was Levy's idea all along, so he played this idea and expected that Black is going to take on e5. Barbosa played really nice move. So he played king b8, which serves multiple purposes, so he walks away with the king from the file, also he keeps the tension in the center, and now after rook c1, he played b6. During the broadcast, I was considering the move f5, which actually made quite a bit of sense, because after bishop f8, I was considering e6, and after g6, white plays g4. But actually, to be honest, I simply forgot Black can play h5. And this, I think, explains the reason why Levy didn't go here, because after h3, you see Black just takes on g4, and because of the rook on h1, White cannot keep the pawn on g4. So here, after h5, yeah, Engine here gives some crazy lines like knight h4, h takes on g4, or, I don't know, knight e7 or knight e5. So the game is a mess. The king is wide open in the center. White has an extra pawn. But still, maybe he should have done this, right? It looks so scary, but again, chess is a very concrete game, and sometimes you have to make concrete decisions. So Levy played rook c1, which is again a pretty normal generic move. Maybe he was hoping that Black is going to regain the pawn, which is going to give him time to regroup the pieces. Barbosa played b6, a3, the pawn has to be protected, b4 is a threat. Barbosa played a5, and here this is a pretty difficult position for White, because e takes, g takes, Black wants to play rook e8 and apply immense pressure. You can basically never castle because this walks into a pin. There's either rook d2 ideas or rook d3 ideas, and just doesn't feel right. So no good easy moves for White. So Levy played king e2, which is a pretty good move, and now after f takes on e5, probably the only move which still keeps the position together is knight e5. Now the point is, after knight e5, f takes on e5, the king is wide open. There's a threat like bishop c8, bishop a6, rook f8, the pawn is, it doesn't matter. And here Levy would have to somehow hold on by pretty difficult moves like b4, takes, and bishop a6, and knight c4, find a way to survive this. Levy played f takes on e5, which Engine marks as a mistake. And why is this? Because now bishop c8 actually is immediately almost killing the game, because this knight on f3 is something that Black's going to use to actually attack. So that's why this knight e5 was important to get rid of this knight from the board. But again, I think that Levy was afraid after f takes knight e5 that there are some checks on d4. So again, we are going to work on this after the tournament to be more concrete. You can't always generalize things in very concrete positions that you have to calculate. So after f takes on e5, here Black played rook f8, which is actually a miss. So the best move maybe was rook e8, attacking here. But rook f8 comes with immediate threat. I mean, Black is simply threatening to take on f3. So rook f3, king f3, and rook takes on d2. Pretty obvious idea. Actually, I have to admit, I did not see this during the broadcast because I was so focused on what White's going to do. So I also missed it. Now that I look at this, of course, this is super, super obvious. So I was trying to figure out how White is trying to get out of the situation. And here Levy has only one move. So he has to play b4, which is a pretty difficult move to make. But again, position demands concrete solutions. Now the point is, after takes, Black cannot take with the knight, because now suddenly White even is winning, right? Everything for Black is starting to fall apart. So after a takes and a takes here, Black would have to give a check on d4, play bishop d4, more or less get the same position that we had before, and after rook f1, let's say Black trades here and plays bishop e5. Black is definitely better. He's pushing, he has monstrous bishop pair here in the center, but White is probably somehow holding on. So rook f1 was played here. And yeah, it just basically shows Levy's state of the mind in the game, since rook takes on f3 was the threat. Levy simply missed it, and now Barbosa took it. Yeah, that's it. So now in his corner, Levy realized that, oh, knight e4 is incoming, the bishop on d2 is under attack, so rook f3 is knight e4, everything just starts to fall apart, and after king f3, rook d2, Levy simply resigned. So it was very tough to watch from my perspective as a chess coach, and I do take the blame for not talking him out of playing this line, because we discussed this briefly before the game, and I thought that it could give him the chance to turn around the game, right? That he would get a spicier position, and this is something that was done in the prep, and maybe Levy could find a way to break the cycle. But actually what happened is the contrary, right? It was just an opening disaster, and as they say after the game, everybody is smart. So unfortunately, another game, another card lesson, right? So I think right now Levy is just hoping for this tournament to be over and try to damage the bleeding. This is just not a good tournament. I don't know what are the reasons, probably purely psychological. It seems like Levy is just not seeing things and somehow not fully focused. We are going to have to find a way to work on these things, but on a positive side, I think that there's always the low point in any of your journeys, and this feels like a low point because Levy, after a successful start in Madrid and the New York Invitational Tournament, also he fought back in Spilimbergo Open Tournament. Now nothing is working for him, right? And basically every single game is worse than the previous game. Yeah, this is how huge is the element of psychology in chess. I mean, Levy lost his painful game in round number 2, and you just lose a lot of confidence. But he's going to come back. We're going to be coming back, obviously. So we are going to take the lessons from this and make sure that this remains the low point. No more losses are incoming. Now the most important thing, again, is to find a way to get in the game. So I would like to thank all the supporters who are supporting Levy in this very difficult moment. And we are going to be back with more games. Today starts round 6, 2 more games today. So actually every single day there's double rounds in the tournament. The game starts at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 6 p.m. Central European Summer Time. If you liked the video, please press like and subscribe to the channel. This is where I will be posting my insights about Levy's progress, maybe some of the big insights from the training process. Thank you for doing this, and see you soon.